I'm Jack Callahan. This is Fox News.
Come try Guam's original Chamorro restaurant with Pica's best 5 years running. Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro. Experience Chef Peter's candied salmon over scallion coconut rice, octopus to naktak, Chamorro platter, and their award-winning gourmet hamburgers. Or if you're looking for something healthy, try their keto-friendly menu. Come and enjoy Mezcla's half-a-day service at their Hagåtña and Grand Plaza Tumon location. Call their Hagåtña location at 479-2652 for reservations.
Your everyday expenses could be earning you savings and rewards with Pacific Points. Earn and redeem points at Shell, Foodies Guam, and IT&E. Want free fuel from Shell and free snacks from Foodies Guam? Sign up for Pacific Points. Want to save on your home internet and cell phone bill? Claim bill rebates and free prepaid cards at IT&E. Want to save on travel costs? Convert points to United Mileage Plus miles. Sign up for free at PacificPoints.com or download the app. Pacific Points. Do more, get more.
Listen to The Point anytime, anywhere on Odyssey. Odyssey is your new audio home for all the music, news, sports, and podcasts that matter to you. Find your favorite stations like The Point and discover more. Music stations, local and trusted news sources, sports talk and team coverage, plus today's biggest podcasts. Find it all on the Odyssey app. AUDACY. Welcome to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, the only show on talk radio where common sense is a lot more common. Phone lines are now open at 888-TALK. That's 888-8255. And now, The Point proudly brings you Tall Tales with Senator Bob Klitzkie.
A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. At least not so long as I got anything to say about it. And it's hard for me to think of any subject where I'm not going to have something to say about it. Okay, so here we are for another exciting episode of Tall Tales. And as usual, we start out with Zemi Ikotny. I got to borrow your hard copy again today, Jose. Sorry. I thought I stuck that in here. Thanks, Jose. Yeah, so it's more of the same thing. I probably ought to just skip it and go straight into the show because it's, unless they have a real editorial, UOG's 70th anniversary is milestone for Guam and the Marianas. Yeah. Very good. Yeah, and what's the point? It could be better. It's not as good as it should be. It's the best there is. It's no good at all, you know.
It could have come from USA Today.
It could have. Yeah, it's about the same quality as USA Today. Now, the Post does not have an editorial, but I've got some breaking news here concerning the Post. You'll recall that about 3 weeks ago, a Cub reporter was promoted to the position of executive editor. That would be a certain Phil Leon Guerrero. Well, apparently Phil has been downgraded because the Post now has an editor-in-chief. So apparently the editor-in-chief pulls rank on the executive editor. Because if we start at the top of the masthead, General Manager Henry J. Titano, Editor-in-Chief Melissa Bettis, Bettis. Executive Director, as you were Executive Editor, Phil Leon Guerrero. Operations Director, Nelson Hernandez. Director of Sales and Marketing, Krista Gaza. Yeah, so I guess the bottom, the very last line there would be known as the Gaza Strip. But Krista Gaza is the only one with any staying power. Everybody
She
else
makes the money.
Everybody else, is replaced an all-star cast. We used to have Mindy Uggan as the publisher. We don't have a publisher anymore. We have a general manager, as though the Daily Post is a factory that cranks out things as opposed to a news organization that prints newspapers. And we have the editor-in-chief, Melissa Bettis, taking over for Gaynor Dumont All. And then we have the executive editor taking the slot that used to be held by Oya Narako. And then I don't recall that there ever was an operations director, but maybe I just forgot. So a complete house cleaning here. And a house cleaning is, we used to think back in the mainland where we have more than one season, we used to talk in terms of spring house cleaning, that when the weather started to warm up, good time to really clean up the house. Go in every single nook and corner and throw away the junk you don't need anymore, etc. We don't have spring here in the island, but the Daily News, I think, did a fall house cleaning, which would be the opposite of the spring house cleaning. They cleaned out all of the really good stuff.
The fall of the House of the Post.
The fall of the House of Post was just ushered in. Yeah. So my cynical nature tells me that I shouldn't think about what they're trying to do, because you consider the new personnel and then the obvious tilt in favor of Governor Lulian Guerrero and the obvious tilt against Michael San Nicolas. Is this part of a overall plan? Let's bring in people that are going to be friendly to the governor and get rid of these other folks that aren't friendly to anybody. They just want to write news objectively. We can't have that. So much for Jimmy Cotney. Let's go on to the card. And, of course, first item on the card is systemic racism with our pal Mr. Z, Paul Zerzan. And then Public Law 36-34. Then Anderson Air Force Base versus the Stranger, who we have now identified, at least tentatively identified, as initially as Luke Topasnia, but the second identification was Matt Topasnia. Seen one Topasnia, he's seen them all. Then we have, after that, we've got the Daily Post versus Michael San Nicolas. Today, it's not what the Daily Post did. It's what the Daily Post didn't do. And then we've got Frank Blas versus the governor. I guess this would be part 3. I just marked it as 2 on the calendar, but it's probably part 3. And then I've got neo-Marxism versus us, but I think I'm going to start out with neo-Marxism. And then I've got Tim versus Joni Gatlago, Levin versus Joey Tetlahi, Priscilla Tuncap versus the Civil Service Commission, the incredible shrinking Merrick Garland, and Wampet 10 versus Nelson. So I think I'll start out with, I don't need to go into systemic racism today, do I? I think everybody's pretty much got a handle on how that phenomenon works. So I've got the results of my scanning of the notices in the paper. And we start out with the Solid Waste Authority breaking the law. They're going to have a meeting on August 25 And item 8 on their agenda is they're going to discuss new business. Want to know what new business they're going to discuss, Jose?
So do they.
Yeah, so do I, because they're not telling us. So whatever you do, guys, you're vulnerable. And then we also have the Port of Guam, call to order. Let's see here. Number 4 on their agenda, adoption of rules of engagement. I wondered what the rules of engagement are.
Probably has nothing to do with the Second Amendment.
Probably not. And then, of course, Rory makes the old business error. They're going to discuss old business. You want to know what old business they're going to discuss? So do I, because it ain't in the agenda. Another good reason to avoid whatever action they take. And then Solid Waste Authority, the new business area. And then I come back to this one again. I'm just got my fingers crossed that Troy is going to pick this one up. This is the agenda for Gita's meeting, which took place at 1:30 p.m. Item 10B, ratification of Resolution 2019 relative to ratifying action taken at prior meetings from July 2022, relevant to waiver of notice and consent to take action by unanimous consent relative to approving the selection of the Bank of Guam as financier for RFP 22-001 and taking related actions. There's so many relatives in there. It looks like a family gathering, Jose. Well, Troy said the other day that he was on it, so let's hope. Let's keep our fingers crossed. Okay, next I've got some national stuff, some philosophical stuff. Neo-Marxism versus us. And I've been harping about this since I've been on the air. Neo-Marxism, the Frankfurt School, 1922, Antonio Gramsci, Herbert Marcuse, the mini coup of the 1960s, the hagiography surrounding George Floyd, and the gaslighting of sensible, common sense, ordinary people by those who would take us down the trail of neo-Marxism. And I've commented on more than one occasion that all of these strange events that are occurring are not isolated events. They're all part of the same phenomenon. And this article kind of lays it out a little bit. Remembrance, this is from Herbert Marcuse. And you'll recall Herbert Marcuse was very prominent in the 1960s. The radicals back in those days chanted, Marx, Mao, and Marcuse. Marx, Mao, and Marcuse. And this is what he said. Remembrance of the past may give rise to dangerous insights, and the established society seems to be apprehensive of the subversive contents of memory. So we got to wipe out memory. You know, the latest thing, if you haven't picked up on it, is the denigration of the founding fathers. George Washington was a horrible person. Thomas Jefferson was scum. James Madison, what a creep. And that piece of junk they put together called the Constitution, that's the source of all our problems. That's what they're saying. That's the leading edge of where we are right now. Give it 6 months and it'll be right smack in the middle. Okay, so here's what a guy named Gary Barnett said on LouRockwell.com. LouRockwell.com is a libertarian website. I go along with a lot of the libertarian stuff, but not all of it. And the reason I don't go along with all of it is that so many libertarian institutions could not survive in the absence of state violence. But we don't need to get into that now. The Marxist position concerning the social nature of man as opposed to the individual is fatally flawed. If decency, respect, morality, and freedom are sought, regardless of the lie that communism is for the benefit of the people. Once the individual is sacrificed and is forced to conform to the wishes of society, any system of decency breaks down. You remember the kind of silly letter I read the other day from the lady with the stage, the collective, and that's and I saw what she was trying to do, in kind of a nonsensical way. She was doing neo-Marxism. Is exactly what she was doing.
It was a regurgitation.
Exactly. No, all this stuff about individual rights. No. In other words, rule based on the majority position and administered or made to coincide with the interest of humanity that referred to as the group called society necessitates force and aggression from either societal or state enforcement, and therefore negates all that is right. There are many ways to build and control what could be classified as a proletariat society, and all of them require the elimination of the individual. If you're going to have a proletarian society, this idea of individuals and individual rights has got to go. Marx's words and beliefs bear this out in no uncertain terms. In today's world, most all efforts to destroy independent thought, normal or considered natural behavior, tradition, family, and honest history are steeped in neo-Marxist techniques, which cause unlimited division, hatred, antagonistic existence, and tearing down and elimination of all past history and moral beliefs. That's exactly where we are. Moral beliefs, thou shalt not kill, unless all moral beliefs such as thou shalt not kill unless, where did it go? I hope I haven't misplaced it. You got it, Jose? Oh, got it all. Oh, yeah, I got it. Yeah. It's impossible to separate our choice of whether and when to have children from every other choice in our lives. Yeah. So I fumbled that a little bit, but it's exactly on point. A tearing down and elimination of all past history, as though there's any other kind, and moral beliefs. You know, belief number one, thou shalt not kill. However, we have a prominent attorney who holds some responsible positions in our community who has told us it's impossible to separate our choice of whether and when to have children from every other choice in our lives. So this thou shalt not kill thing, well, there's an exception. And that is if the person that you want to kill happens to still be just barely inside your body, it doesn't count. And along the same lines, you don't have to be a woman to have a child. Men can get pregnant too. And if you are a man, if when you were born they put male on your birth certificate, you're not stuck with that. You can become a woman if you want to. That's exactly what this stuff is.
It's a fluid document.
All of these things that we talk about and we chuckle about, but they're really not funny because it's all part of this neo-Marxist preconditioning to take us from where we are to where we ought to be in the group. This state of affairs in the U.S. today, as total chaos has come to the forefront due to not to proper anarchical principles, which are based on individual freedom. Anarchists are there for freedom, too much freedom, right? But due to neo-Marxist and communistic ideology advanced through psychological and aggressive means and supported by the ruling class. Klaus Schwab, Bill Gates, Jeffrey, what's his name? Jeffrey Sams? Close. Jeffrey Sachs. Yeah, he's another one of them. And unfortunately, the Pope, the leader of the Roman Catholic Church, is right in there with that gang. And, you know, if there were anything that could save us from this, it could have been the Catholic Church, because the Catholic Church has saved society on more than one occasion. And the Catholic Church, of course, has gone off the rails, but it's always been the laity that put it back on track.
The real church.
Yeah, the real church. So, due to neo-Marxist and communistic ideology advanced through psychological and aggressive means supported by the ruling class. At this time in history, the common people are but mere illiterate pawns in this game of power and control. So many people, probably there's some listening today, are saying, yeah, I don't know anything about this. And if you strike up a conversation, you know, if you can strike up a casual conversation with somebody and say, what do you think about neo-Marxism? Oh, is that Groucho? You know, they really stayed under the radar in the process of doing all this stuff. Common people are but mere illiterate pawns in this game of power and control, so much as to be the responsible foundation of the destruction of man. This is an untenable reality about our situation, as the very people claiming a desire for freedom and, quote, equality have destroyed any chance of liberty by accepting what can be referred to as blind collectivism leading to communism. This wording might seem somewhat confusing, but mass collectivism cannot exist without a communistic mentality by the majority, and without communistic ideology, unadulterated collectivism in any free society is not conceivable. So you have to do that. You have to have this confusion that leads to this communistic society. The human animal is certainly social, and this helps to solidify our need for common association in order to satisfy our need for each other and to better function and survive. But once that social bonding becomes forced or mandatory and becomes legally ordered, a new paradigm of totalitarianism is born. And that's where we are. The whole anti-racism, BLM, the whole outfit. Regardless of the contradiction concerning communist ideology, the neo-Marxist system is based on two very distinct existing classes. The large class of propertyless workers, consisting in the entirety of the masses, and the elite class, or state heads who are exempt from all societal rules and regulations and own or control all the property. As mentioned, this is a direct contrast to the basis of communism as described by Marx, which would result in people seizing through violent revolt from the oppressing bourgeoisie all wealth and means of production. In most cases, the people seeking communism allege to want to eliminate the class system in order to achieve total equality. Now remember, equality is one of the big three, Jose. Diversity, equality, and equity. Yeah, and of course, in order to have total equity, you've got to pay, total equality, you've got to pay attention to equity. And neither of those words mean what they used to mean under the system of neo-Marxism. They want to eliminate the class system in order to achieve total equality and utopia for all. But in essence, they bring about their submission to power, the exact situation they pretend to detest. He's talking about all of the people that have, become politically correct, the useful idiots who really don't know what they're doing. An example, even Jane Flores talks about birthing people, Yeah. This is where the left side of the left-right divide negates all claimed ambitions of eliminating class structure in favor of a ruling class over society. This can only be due to indoctrination, ignorance, and stupidity. Now, indoctrination, ignorance, and stupidity, we have our own group right here on the island. I'm not going to say they're neo-Marxist. They are neo-Marxist, but they certainly use neo-Marxist techniques, don't they? There's hope. They continue to think there is hope. We are now in transition to the exact type of society where the few control all through very aggressive and restrictive governmental and technocratic methods. We never thought in terms of being censored by private enterprise until we found out about Twitter and Facebook and et cetera.
Everywhere.
Yeah, everywhere. And that we remain completely outside and separate from the masses in every way. This is what globalism is all about. One completely separate ruling class and all the rest slaves. This is the system being built. And once fully achieved, it will be nearly impossible to destroy. I give you the Soviet Union. Soviet Union lasted for 70 years. Probably if they had been better at what they were doing, they'd still be around. They're kind of flubbed. Okay, consider our current circumstances and what has been allowed to replace our traditional society based on the natural right to life, leading to freedom, property ownership by the individual, family, free speech, and the right to defend oneself from any aggression. These things have disappeared almost entirely. And that's the Second Amendment thing, the ability to defend yourself from any aggression. If you are able to bear arms, you got a pretty good chance of defending yourself from any aggression. If not, it's kind of a crapshoot. These things have disappeared almost entirely and been replaced with communist terror in the form of neo-Marxism at the hands of the controlling class, the state, and all those supporting the state. We live in a world turned upside down where everything of value has become taboo. Motherhood, patriotism, love of country. If you are not an oikophobe, you just don't fit in. Members of the Congress, oikophobes. Well, the opposite had become the mainstay of this sorry society of mindless drones. Family and morality are looked down upon, while unbridled exuberance towards the immoral is embraced. I use the word sexual anarchy from time to time. This deviation from the norms. Man and woman are complementary. They are necessary for reproduction. Complementary, meaning they complement one another. They don't have to compete with one another. This attitude is now widespread, and back to sexual anarchy. That men can have children and that men can become women, and that it's okay it's to be celebrated if Herman wants to marry Henry instead of Henrietta. This has to become the norm. Sexual anarchy. This attitude is now widespread and was not accidental, as the whole idea of neo-Marxism is meant to destroy the memory of all past, in favor of establishing a new order based on communistic ideology bent on the destruction of accepted long-term norms. Okay, destruction of the past. You think pulling down all these statues, you think this was just a scrap metal drive? That's destruction of the past. And they picked on the easiest ones first, but they're after, Father Junipero Serra in California.
Right.
Yeah. And it won't be long before there'll be a movement to tear down the Washington Monument or rename it the George Floyd Monument or some silliness like that. All right, let's take a short break here.
Announcing the point on Alexa. In addition to our FM and HD radio feeds, our incredible app, informative website, Facebook Live, and YouTube Live, you can now tell Alexa to stream The Point. And your smart speaker will start playing whatever we're saying. News and views 24/7 with your 4-word command. Alexa, stream The Point.
Welcome back to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, Guam's single voice of reason. Call now, 888-TALK. That's 888-8255.
Okay, here we are back on Tall Tales, and we're talking about neo-Marxism. And I was talking about sexual anarchy, currently transsexual behavior is presented by the state and media as normal. Someone who is born a man or a woman with male or female plumbing who now wants to present himself as the opposite. And they won't even go along with the opposite because some are non-binary. And then there may be more than just two sexes. Sexual anarchy. This notion is pushed in the faces of all who have any exposure to any form of media, education, or government indoctrination's efforts as if it was honestly apparent in every human situation. This is asinine. The same is true of how homosexuality is presented and every other form of this type of behavior. What people choose to do voluntarily and without harm to others and without intimidation or aggression toward another is one thing, but any expectation or initiation of forced acceptance is patently wrong. Society as a whole has been inundated with the false assumption that everything not normal is normal. It's no different with the ridiculous racism lie. There have always been racists, and there always will be, because that's the nature of a minority of the population and has always been present in man. It is not relegated just to white. In fact, it's apparent to some degree in every culture. It is a cross-culture phenomenon. It has been purposely made to seem to be targeted only a few groups and falsely labeled as terror against all state-chosen minorities. And we know state-chosen. Some are better than others, right? When in reality is less obvious than it has ever been in history, that as far as racism is concerned. The biggest change has been in the isolation of racism to certain groups, meant only to cause hatred and division due to the state's agenda of control. What is evident is that hatred of all against all is rampant, and that cannot be labeled as due to one's personal preference, but to a plotted result by the ruling elites. There is also the intentional government promotion and acceptance of atrocious criminal behavior by evil groups like BLM and Antifa and certain others as well. This behavior is justified by the state in order to gain more control overall by normalizing atrocious behavior. The summer of 2020. By the few who are being used to instill fear so as to cause societal disorder. This is all part of the plot of this totalitarian regime. Most of all, the enforcement arms of government are on board with this evil and purposely stage, participate in, intentionally allow constant acts of terror to be prevalent throughout society. This is evident in the allowance and prosecution of intimidation, criminal behavior, police state brutality, allowed rioting and property destruction, mass shootings, especially against children, which creates much more psychological and emotional response from those who are sought to be ruled over and controlled. These are all meant to advance particular state agendas. Of the many subplots of this world takeover agenda, illegitimate man-made climate change will remain the primary force. The virus scams will continue, as will the drive for central bank digital currencies, digitizing all transactions, vaccine passports, supply chain disruptions, manufactured food shortages, energy regulations and energy use restrictions, carbon limit restrictions, water mandates, more promotion of gender insanity, and certainly much more extreme propaganda concerning the, quote, wonder of depraved behavior.
That was a warning, and it looks like the White House administration used it as a template.
Exactly. They used it as their own playbook.
The roadmap.
All this and much more, including horrific false flag attacks and events by the government and its henchmen, are coming this fall and winter, in my opinion, and with it the likely possibility of civil unrest, civil war, hot war, and martial law. Prepare yourselves for hell on earth as the globalists continue their assault against us, as the masses have not yet decided to anything of value to help themselves to stop this onslaught against humanity. Well, I agree with almost everything in there. I guess my one hope for the masses is a guy that the other guys hate, Donald Trump.
Well, it's so. I want to talk more about that because I think it's very important. But it's easy for them to label us conspiracy theorists. But I can't get over the fact that station or news station after news station, the big media groups say the same exact thing about gaslighting us, about not threatening the FBI, and we have to be ready for the conservatives or the Republicans to be attacking police. And I'm like, are you kidding me? You guys are the ones saying this and calling this. Nobody has said any of that.
Yeah.
Nobody. But I think they're stirring a pot, and the media are the fools, the jesters, who are regurgitating what these people are telling them to say. Yeah, they're saying the same exact thing.
Exactly. And, if you study Marxism a little bit, not as much as I should have, but I have, you don't need the masses for a Marxist revolution to prevail. You need a cadre of very well-trained, very smart people who know how to pull levers and push the buttons. And that's what we're living through right now. George Floyd was such a gift. I mean, they've been building this for a long time. But when George Floyd came along, actually it was the video, right? Just a classic perfect storm of all of these things lining up at one time. And the neo-Marxists went nuts, for a whole summer. They did everything that this guy's talking about. And of course, the media helped us out with the transgenders and all the rest of that stuff. And our president, the word useful idiot is a term that you got to be careful throwing it around. But in his case, I can't think of a better term, a useful idiot, because he's marching right along with them, and he doesn't know any better. They told him, Joe, if we do all of these wonderful things and we live in this new society, you'll be able to get as much ice cream as you want. You won't have to pay for it. Where do I sign? He said.
It's funny now, but it's almost a really sad. I'm sad for our country to have a president like this. I mean, we just got through watching a video of him shaking hands with who's Chuck Schumer, right?
Yeah.
And then Chuck Schumer goes to shake hands with all these other people up there at the podium, and President Biden puts his hand out again as if he's waiting to shake hands with Chuck Schumer. And I was like, that's just...
He's just out of it.
If it was anybody else, especially Trump, the media would have had a field day.
Absolutely. Yeah, even Jimmy Carter, who wasn't exactly a hard charger, but he wasn't dumb. He actually could qualify as a scientist because his work on nuclear power when he was in the Navy. He was a smart guy. He just had kind of an approach that didn't fit very well with the American temperament at the time. But this guy, even when he was at his prime, he doesn't pack a whole lot of gear in his brain housing group. He's not a smart guy. But he had one skill. He figured out how to make the political process work for him. He got elected to the Senate from Delaware way back when. He rode Amtrak every day from Wilmington to D.C., and he made all kinds of mistakes along the way, getting caught plagiarizing and all kinds of crazy stuff. But somehow he always managed to get out from under it. And then his son, Hunter, and the laptop, classic example of big media covering up for their guy.
I mean, we have our little mini cover-ups here on Guam also, but it's just amazing how we're not, it feels like we're not fully aware what's going on, or we are aware, but we just choose to sota, right?
Yeah,
Sota
prim, let it go, yeah. Okay, we got to take a short break here, and we'll come back to Frank Blas versus the governor.
Come try Guam's original Chamorro restaurant with Pica's Best 5 years running. Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro. Experience Chef Peter's candied salmon over scallion coconut rice, octopus to naktak, Chamorro platter, and their award-winning gourmet hamburgers. Or if you're looking for something healthy, try their keto-friendly menu. Come and enjoy Mezcla's half-a-day service at their Hagåtña and Grand Plaza Tuman location. Call their Hagåtña location at 479-2652 for reservations.
Choice Broadcasting introduces their unbeatable lineup of morning show.
Hands down winners of Guam's morning radio battle.
Daryl Lizama grooves his way through Boss 104 playing Guam's favorite classic hits.
Morning Mouth Ray Gibson shakes the cage on 93.3 The Point.
And now, we are proud to announce the Morning Blender with Kyle Mandapat, mixing it up at sunrise on Star 101.
If you're an advertiser trying to reach the most valuable ears, we've got the shows that listeners have been tuning into for decades.
One call gets all three.
671-888-7346. That's 888-REIO.
Okay, so here we are, back again with Tall Tales. We got about 12 minutes, 11 minutes to that big halftime show. I'm going to get started here with Frank Blas. I don't think I can finish. So we started out with battling news releases or speeches. Frank Blas on the floor of the legislature, saying, "Governor, you made these raises. You gave these raises to teachers, and it wasn't legal." And he pounded on that for quite a bit. And the governor came back with her own press release that countered it. And based on the press releases yesterday, I ruled in favor of Frank Blas, just on what was reported in the press release. I'm going to have to reverse myself today, and I'll explain in a minute. But I also said that even though Frank Blas won on the law as presented in the press releases, he lost in the game of politics, which is the game that he's playing. You're not going to make any points with anybody when a salary increase has been in place. People have seen the color of the money. It's going to last until September 30, and then you're coming forward and saying the governor can't do that, et cetera, and causing all those teachers to think, is Frank Blas going to do something so that I don't get that raise? Frank Blas, boo. So, And I characterized what the governor had done as a political mousetrap, that she used her federal money that she didn't have to go to the legislature for to put the raise in place until September 30, kind of putting the legislature between a rock and a hard place. You don't want to appropriate local money for the raise that I gave the teachers? Well, your call. September 30 to November 8th, go ahead, do it. See what happens. You know, so it was a politically very astute move on her part, the political mousetrap. And had Frank Blas not said boo, it's still a good political maneuver. Now, when I say a good political maneuver, I don't say salutary, beneficial, helping the people. I should have said skillful political maneuver on her part, because it really put the legislature in an awkward position. But then Frank Blas compounds the difficulty for himself, because he sees this political mousetrap and all of a sudden he has a craving for cheese. And he walks into the mousetrap and picks up the cheese, and boom, that trap comes right around and pins him to the deck, because he is now attached to a rap of taking the raise away from teachers if he gets what he wants. And regardless of how it works, it doesn't turn out good for him. If he prevails on the law or the legislature makes the necessary appropriation, it kind of reminds me of, I should have looked this up, it kind of reminded me of, I think it might have been James G. Blaine from Maine, who said, "I'd rather be right than president." And as it turned out, he was neither. He was neither right nor president. So the fact that Frank Blas is even right on the law is going to be small comfort to him, because it looks like, you know, the imagery created is that he's trying to take these raises away from teachers. So in that case, it's a self-inflicted wound. So after that, the governor wrote a letter and Frank Blas wrote a letter. So we're going to do a little dueling letters here. So I'll try to get to the really key parts here without having to go through the whole letter. I think maybe before I start that, I'm going to check and see who's in the green room here. Yeah, another Joe wants to give kudos to Blas Jr. Why don't you wait till I'm finished with him, another Joe? That's probably going to be after the big halftime show, but I want you to get on the air, but I want to finish this up first, okay? So here's what the governor says. It is my understanding that you and Senator Atta have expressed reservations regarding the implementation of the updated educator pay plan in May 2022. Your reservations appear to stem from the provisions of the fiscal year 22 Budget Act, which provides funding for DOE to conduct a teacher pay plan study for submission to the legislature in September 2022 and implementation in June of 2023. I'm writing to discuss the circumstances surrounding the May 2022 implementation of the educator pay plan, the legal framework authorizing such implementation, and the substantial reasons the legislature should not, listen to this, the substantial reasons the legislature should not disrupt the implementation. That's the kind of language that you want to use if you want to keep the teachers on your side. Now, I'm going to skip ahead from that first paragraph because she recognizes that they're hanging their hat on a provision in the 2022 budget. And she says, and I'll fill this in later on, she says later on, the delegation of authority to DOA has never been repealed or amended, including by the fiscal year 2022 Budget Act. Therefore, DOA retains its authority to assess and update government pay schedules. And I went through the section, the part of the Budget Act that Frank and the gang are relying on. Which says it starts out talking about $100,000 for a study. Let's see, funding the educator classification, et cetera, and study the final implementation plan to adjust compensation classification benefits shall be submitted by the governor to the speaker no later than September 30. The implementation shall take place no later than September 30 the next year. Did you hear the word repeal in there, Jose? No. Once again, I don't know who drafted this, but I suspect it was a minority. If you're going in there, if you're playing this game, and it's not really a game, but if you want to participate in this activity, you need counsel. You can't, just because you can sit down at a keyboard doesn't mean that you can draft statutes or even floor amendments. You need a lawyer. And that becomes more and more apparent the farther I get into this. So she goes on to say, for 30 years, Guam law has delegated the responsibility to assess and update government pay schedules to the Department of Administration. I don't think they delegated it to the department. I think it get it to the Director of Administration. In Public Law 21-42, Part 5, Section 13, the legislature adopted and implemented a unified pay schedule, etc. Let's get out the Law and Order notebooks, Jose. Okay, now she cites Public Law 21-42, Part 5, Section 13 for an important part of her argument. Now, I cheated. I went to the net, and I looked up this section. And it's got nothing to do with this. It's just appropriations. So she cited the wrong public law. But even if she had cited the right public law, I want to throw this caution out to everybody. Don't rely on public laws. Because here's how it works, and probably no one ever explained this to you. We have a body of laws called the Guam Code Annotated. There are 21 titles in the Guam Code Annotated. And in those 21 titles, you will find all the statutory law of the government of Guam. How does a statute get into the Guam Code Annotated? It starts at the legislature. A bill is introduced in the legislature. It goes through a 3-reading process. If a majority vote for it, override, whatever, when it becomes law, then an official called the compiler of laws, a very efficient lady who works for the court over at the law library, takes that public law and fits it into the Guam Code Annotated where it belongs. Now, it's usually easy to tell where it belongs because in the public law, you'll see title, chapter, section, subsection, etc. Sometimes the legislature makes a mistake. Jerry gets it in the right place no matter what. So a public law is good the day that it's signed into law. It's good law. And maybe the next day. But you can't really rely on it after that because another public law comes along and amends the statute in that first public law. You won't know that from looking at the public law. The only way that you'll know that is to look at the code section. So when people make arguments based on public law, hang on to your hat, because oftentimes it's a way to really conceal what their real argument is. All right, let's go to the big halftime show. I can't wait till I can finish this and talk to another Joe. I'm just wondering if he hears me.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
Court battle over the affidavit. I'm Jack Callahan, Fox News. In federal court in Miami today between the feds and former President Trump's legal team over the affidavit used to get a search warrant for the president's home at Mar-a-Lago. The Trump team wants it made public with no redactions. Government lawyers do not.
Department of Justice saying they want that affidavit to remain sealed. They've expressed concerns that if it is opened, it could compromise their investigation. They've also expressed concerns that opening the affidavit could endanger some of the witnesses that they've spoken to.
Fox's Steve Harrigan, Mr. Trump's attorney, says she does not expect a favorable ruling from the magistrate who issued the warrants. Alan Weisselberg, the former chief financial officer of the Trump organization, is expected to plead guilty today to charges he took compensation under the table, thereby avoiding paying taxes on it. He's agreed to serve 100 days in jail and may be called to testify against the organization in courts. Rudy Giuliani says he has satisfied his obligation after hours of questioning Wednesday before a Georgia grand jury over attempts to overturn the 2020 election results in Georgia. The Miami-Dade Police Department says an officer shot 2 nights ago trying to arrest a robbery suspect has died in a Miami hospital.
Miami-Dade Police Director Freddie Ramirez wrote a heartbreaking message on social media Wednesday evening. It is with great sadness and heavy hearts that we announce the untimely passing of Officer Cesar Echi Echeverri. Surrounded by loved ones, Echi succumbed to his injuries. Officer Echeverri died in the line of duty while serving and protecting our community.
Maricela Burgos of Fox affiliate WSVN in Miami. Officer Echeverri was 29. The suspect was also shot and killed Monday evening. State of Texas has executed Kasul Chantakuman for the 2006 murder of real estate agent Sarah Walker. America is listening to Fox News.
Half a day. This is Clara Manglania from Security Title. A power of attorney can be a useful tool in a real estate transaction, but if abused, it can result in devastating loss. Choosing your representative should be done with the utmost care and should be very specific about the powers being granted. To mitigate loss, the team at Security Title confirms with the owner prior to using a power of attorney to sell the property. Each transaction is unique. Let the professionals at Security Title use our experience to facilitate a secure closing. We are here to help.
The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training.
Hi, I'm Jerry Roberts, and every day on The Ray Gibson Show, I get to comment on the incredibly diverse, fun, challenging, sometimes frustrating, often exciting, but always interesting world of work. I hope you'll be there with us.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point at guamtraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts, brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services and First Hawaiian Bank on 93.3 The Point.
Teachers and staff at a Wisconsin school district have been told they cannot display anything political in the classroom.
The ban is wide-ranging. No signs supporting Black Lives Matter or police, for instance, and no pride flags, leading to an emotional meeting of the Kettle Moraine School Board Tuesday night.
Not controversial. I am not political. I am a person.
2 local high school students spearheaded a petition drive against the ban, arguing in part that having a rainbow flag doesn't amount to pushing beliefs on anyone.
Pride flags are not me taking a political stance. They are a statement saying I accept myself and others.
The school board voting unanimously to keep the code of conduct in place. The superintendent says a recent interpretation also prohibits specifying preferred pronouns in staff emails. An attorney with the American Civil Liberties Union of Wisconsin says she is looking at policies in 2 districts. Lisa Brady, Fox News.
The head of the Centers for Disease Control announcing a shakeup of the organization, saying it fell short of responding to COVID-19 and needs to become more nimble. The planned changes come amid criticism of the CDC's response to the coronavirus outbreak, monkeypox, and other public health threats. The changes include internal staffing moves and steps to speed up data releases. A federal judge has found that Walgreens, Walmart, and CVS created a public nuisance by oversupplying 2 Ohio counties with opioids. They've been ordered to pay the county $650 million. The Florida prosecutor suspended recently by Governor Ron DeSantis is suing to get his job back. Andrew Warren says the voters are the ones who put him in office.
If the governor's attempt to unilaterally overturn an election is allowed to stand, it threatens to undermine the integrity and outcomes of elections across our state for years to come.
Governor DeSantis says he removed Warren as the Hillsborough County State's attorney over his refusal to enforce state laws on abortion and gender-affirming treatment for minors. I'm Jack Callahan. This is Fox News.
There is no denying that these past 2.5 years have brought unprecedented challenges, where our health, safety, and way of life have been completely upended as a result of COVID. Having served as governor during many challenges, I know a thing or two about the importance of strong and steady leadership in times of crisis. Trust me when I say that I have full confidence that Lou and Josh are the leaders Guam needs at this pivotal time in our history. Lou and Josh have led our island through some of our darkest times, and because they stayed the course, our island is on the verge of a recovery that will infuse life back into an economy thirsting for a fresh start. I've said it before, and I mean it still. People of Guam, you're still the one.
This is Governor Lou Leon Guerrero.
Listen to The Point anytime, anywhere on Odyssey. Odyssey is your new audio home for all the music, news, sports, and podcasts that matter to you. Find your favorite stations like The Point and discover more. Music stations, local and trusted news sources, sports talk and team coverage, plus today's biggest podcasts. Find it all on the Odyssey app. AUDACY.
Well, here we are, another big halftime show that we all like so much. And during the halftime show, you had a chance to look at a Tailgater T-shirt and a really nice-looking beard. Now, I know how to get I got a couple of Tailgater T-shirts myself, and I know how to get more, and I get them for my friends and so on. But the beard, that's kind of hard. And so I've been working with Tony, and I said, Tony, can't you get me a beard? And Tony said, I'm sorry, Jose. Jose said, I've been working with Jose, and Jose said, Bob, you kind of got to grow it yourself. And I said, won't that take a long time? And Jose said, you'll grow into it. All right, so where was I here? I was going through the governor's letter here and explained to you why whenever people use references to public laws as an argument as to what the law is, be very, very careful, because last week's public law may not be this week's actual law. You always want to look for a Guam Code annotated statutory reference. And even then, there's a slight time lag. If a new provision became law today, it's not going to be in the Guam Code annotated tomorrow, maybe next week. Jerry moves pretty fast over there. So I left off with the governor's reference to Public Law 21-42, Part 5, Section 13. There isn't anything there that deals with what she says it deals with. Probably an inappropriate or erroneous reference to erroneous citation. But then she goes on to Guam Code Annotated, and she says that the legislature further provided that internal equity and external competitiveness of the plan should be reviewed at least every 3 years, and that ongoing communication and training was a critical component of administering the compensation policy. And she cites 4 GCA Section 6301C and F. Administrative pay plan based on Hay methodology was assigned to the Director of Administration, who, along with the Judicial Council, was further charged with the responsibility to establish policies and procedures, etc., in their respective jurisdictions for GCA Section 6302A and C. And then she makes a reference to 4 GCA 4105, which she says the director may at his discretion delegate the authority to update its own pay plan. And once again, that's a mistake. And I have that section of law here somewhere. I thought I had it. Yeah, I guess I didn't bring it along. But once again, a mistake. 4105 is a section of law that talks in terms of generate the making of personnel rules and regulations for things like discipline. It doesn't say what the governor says it says. However, I think her references to 6302A and C and 6301C and F get her where she needs to go. And then, as she points out, the delegation of authority to DOA has never been repealed or amended, including by the fiscal year 2022 Budget Act. So if the only thing that Frank Bloss and Tony Atta are relying on is that section of this year's fiscal budget, they lose because the word repeal doesn't appear in there. So, you know, when you're people think that, well, the way you draft a statute, you don't use the term once upon a time or it came to pass or something like that, but you just write down what you want it to say, and that's all you need to do. First thing you got to do is find out what the law on the books is when you start. You got to find out what the law is, where it's located, how it works, and what you need to do to it in order to have the law that you want, the bill that you want to become law, to be effective. And whoever drafted this Section 18 obviously didn't do that because there's other law in the books. No one ever took the time to say, notwithstanding the provisions of. That would have been a good way to do it. Or section blah, blah, blah is repealed. But they didn't. They just fired away. What we'll do is this. We'll just let them do it and make it effective next year. And they'll all love us forever because we're giving them a raise. That's probably the thought process that went into this. So the governor's letter lays it out. She cites to the law. She doesn't. It's not as artful as it could be. And she winds up by saying, well, the fiscal year budget 22 Budget Act contemplated a GDOE pay study to be implemented a year from now. The immediate implementation in May 22 of the educator pay plan developed by DOA helped alleviate the rise in the cost of living and inflation issues I would have expected that you would want to address as soon as possible. Our teachers have already started to receive the benefit of the educator pay plan, and any disruption to its implementation would be extremely detrimental to their well-being and the well-being of our children. That's the governor. Okay, now I got Frank Bloss's letter. I am in receipt of your letter referencing the implementation of the educator pay plan, and while I want to appreciate the explanation given for your implementation, your letter and the information obtained afterwards have raised more questions than answers. Not a good way to start a letter. And once again, Law and Order notebooks, Jose, I'll tip you off to a trade secret, okay? Lawyers who have clients never ask somebody else what the law is. If you're a tax attorney and you're doing a tax return for your client, you're ethical, you study the law, you know what the law provides, you know what it doesn't provide, you know how, and you know that the law is a system of lines, and you know that what people are looking for is for a lawyer who can get just as close to that line as possible, but he never crosses the line. And it's the same way with tax, doing income tax. So the taxpayer wants every deduction and credit and everything he can get out of that tax attorney who's doing his return. How often do you think that tax attorney calls up the director of Rev Tax and says, I'm working on a Section 231 deduction here. Can I deduct that? No, it never happens. Lawyers don't ask. Lawyers develop the best position that they can for their client, for their situation within the bounds of ethics and Rule 11, and they advance that position. And if somebody else tells them they're wrong, that's the way the law works. But you don't ask. So here's Frank Blas's leading sentence. I am in receipt of your letter referencing the implementation of the educator pay plan, and while I want to appreciate the explanation given for your implementation, your letter and the information obtained afterwards have raised more questions than answers. In the attempt to explain your administration's actions, you first reference Public Law 2142, Part 5, Section 13, that adopted and implemented a unified pay schedule. You further allude to this law by stating that the Director of Administration is charged with the responsibility to establish policies and procedures for implementation of the compensation policies. You state that with this responsibility, the DOA Director has the authority to delegate assessment and update for the unified pay schedule. Obviously, Frank Blas didn't do the same thing I did, because he's treating 2142, Part 5, Section 13, as though it's as the governor describes it. In your continued endeavor to explain your reasoning, you made reference to Public Law 3268, the Government of Guam Competitive Wage Act of 2014, contained in the 2014 Budget Act, which required a pay plan to adjust the compensation classification and benefits of public employees be submitted by the governor to the legislature for approval. You took great effort to indicate that while the governor at that time submitted a plan to the legislature as was required, he subsequently and unilaterally implemented a pay plan. You went on to provide that as a result of a disagreement with the legislature, Governor Calvo made the unilateral move. However, what you failed to acknowledge was that the action occurred after he submitted the plan to the legislature and permitted the necessary and deliberative process to occur. And of course, the governor was Governor Calvo. So here it's an appeal to authority. Calvo, your own Governor Calvo did it, so that must be the right answer. Otherwise, you guys are Republicans, aren't you? Yeah. Then your letter takes an interesting turn as you contradict the testimony of your DOA director had provided in the committee of the whole hearing the legislature is currently having. Well, your DOA director had repeatedly stated that the prevailing statute to deal with the educators' pay and the Competitive Wage Act of 2014, you wrote, while the legislature can certainly pass a law to revert to the 8-year-old pay plan for teachers, I can state unequivocally, that I will veto any such measure. And then Frank goes on to say, if this is so, and if the only relevant 8-year-old law is the Competitive Wage Act of 2014, what law are you using to implement the pay plan? If you disagree with the methodology, your DOA director testified is being used. So what he's doing, he's playing the game. He's giving her the home court advantage because he's playing the football game on her field, not on his field. He's not the one who's defining the issues. He's allowing her to define the issues. Had your staff taken the time to digest a discussion on the legislative floor with the Guam Department of Education representatives instead of churning out a fact-deficient press release. So now the next item that we want to talk about is the care and feeding of press releases, how to really do a press release. And she screwed up because the staff didn't pay attention to what was going on the floor. They would have heard the DOE staff recognize Section 18, Chapter 11 of Public Law 36-54. They testified that GDOE used $75,000 of that amount allocated in Public Law 36-34 to conduct a teacher pay study. Okay, that's demurrable, so it's true. So what? Well, they could not testify to what the previous superintendent did with the study. And this is the reason that you don't delegate all this authority. You do it in a form of public laws so you don't have to say, well, can we call him up and find out what the law is, what he actually did? And, of course, I can tell you what he did. He was so busy taking his victory lap that he forgot about the department, the air conditioners and everything else. While they could not testify what the previous superintendent did with the study, it was their understanding that they did it to follow and comply with the law. Therefore, if that's what they thought the law was, what better source of statutory interpretation could you have than the lay people over at the Department of Education? To further add to my concerns with the process used to implement the raises, I found that GDOE referenced yet another law as justification to reprogram their federal funding to initially pay for raises. Well, that's interesting. In documents obtained from GDOE for their request to the United States Department of Education to use pandemic-related funding for teacher raises and staff incentives, they referenced Public Laws 28-36 and 28-68, a pay plan that requires action from the Civil Service Commission. Well, if you've taken a look at those statutes, 68 repealed 36 and gave that authority to the Director of Administration, took it away from the Civil Service Commission. But you'd only know that if you actually looked up those public laws. Let's see. Competitive Wage Act and Consular Pay Plan address fiscal year 2022 estimated $10.5 million shortfall as a result of the unfunded Government of Guam mandate. Public Law 2836, will take effect. Now, he's saying that the pay plan will take effect on May 23, 2022. I can't even make any sense out of that. Now with all these different, now here he goes. Here's the signed confession. Here's the smoking gun, Jose. And it's a great line. And I use it all the time myself, and I've got expectations for you. But this is not how a senator persuades people of the correctness of his case. Okay, Frank then goes on to say, now, with all these different laws being cited, it begs the question, who's on first?
I don't know.
That's our short step. Don't you want a clarification?
Who's on first?
Yes, he is.
I don't.
You're supposed to say what?
Oh, what?
Yeah, second base.
Oh, I don't even know anymore.
I think that's the right fielder.
Okay, I'm still on PL 28, 36, 5.
Yeah.
Hut.
Yeah. So Frank Moss's argument position is, I don't know what's going on. who's on first? But, you know, I know that I'm right because I know that you're wrong. With the confusion and contradictions your administration had put forth to justify the methodology and process used to implement the pay plan, I'm sure that as a former legislator and bank CEO yourself, you can understand the concern and question that I and a number of my colleagues have with this matter. Well, if you have a concern, why don't you do something about it instead of writing a long letter saying, I don't know what the hell's going on. Who's on first? Not to mention not understanding that the term begs the question does not mean suggests a question. Begs the question means you've assumed the answer in the body of your question. This is an example of begging the question, Frank. Frank, when did you stop beating your wife? That's begging the question. Or Frank, are you still beating your wife? Oh, that's begging the question, not what you got here. With the confusion and contradictions, as you were, I already read that. Yeah, so then I'm sure that as a former legislator and bank CEO yourself, you can understand the concern and question that I and a number of my colleagues have with the matter. Now he's begging for a little empathy. Had you followed the pathway provided by Public Law 36-54 while utilizing the tools and authorities afforded by existing statutes, the quandary of not knowing or contradicting testimony provided by your DOA director or statute GDOE used in its funding request and justification would not have occurred. And then what? That's a big so what. So Byrne got the burn because he cited the wrong statute. Does that mean that you're right? Or does it mean that you caught Byrne saying something that wasn't correct? Not the same thing. With regard to Tony Atta and I with our inquiries, not position statements, inquiries, we share concern with the methodology process your administration used to implement the teacher's pay plan. Furthermore, we want to be confident that the proper steps were taken to avoid legal scrutiny and the possibility that if actions were determined to be contrary to law, that the raises may be retracted and the employees ordered to pay back the money they received. That's a good sentence to have connected with your name, Frank. You know, have associated with the name Frank Blas. Now, who's going to sue? The teachers because you did it wrong? The governor because you did it wrong? You're certainly not going to sue, Frank. First of all, I don't think you'd have standing. And second, obviously, you don't know any lawyers, or you'd have one helping you with this, or you'd have one doing this for you. Okay, and here's the added bonus. A couple more tidbits before closing. In a meeting I was asked to attend in the morning of Friday, August 12th, I was told that its purpose was to hopefully resolve your administration's failure to submit a pay plan to the legislature as directed by Public Law 36-34. I believe I was cooperative enough to hold off bringing the issue for at least 72 hours before the body to give your administration and my Democrat colleagues an opportunity to come up with a resolution. It became clearly evident in the number of political advertisements about the teacher pay raise that appeared in print media of the course of action you decided to take. Secondly, please do not think or believe that I do not value or appreciate the momentous work and sacrifice our teachers provide every day in their profession. Please do not be of the opinion that I do not care for teachers, nor acknowledge the fact that they teach our children with utmost professionalism and passion despite the pay they receive. As a proud and loving spouse of a teacher, I see and I experience it every day. So please refrain from stating that I don't support teachers. So you had a meeting. Who'd you have the meeting with, Frank? Well, you don't want to mention that because maybe they'll get mad. Maybe they'll take issue with you. Maybe they'll contradict you. If you're not going to tell the story, then leave it out. Don't tell half the story and then go on with the rest. So I got to grade this. I've been on Jim Moylan a little bit for writing letters all the time, but this is really a pathetic performance from a Republican senator. And maybe it's not too late. Maybe you can hire a lawyer for the rest of this session. Okay, let's go to Wrigley Field for a seventh inning stretch.
Try Guam's original Chamorro restaurant with Pica's Best 5 years running. Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro. Experience Chef Peter's candied salmon over scallion coconut rice, octopus tenactac, Chamorro platter, and their award-winning gourmet hamburgers. Or if you're looking for something healthy, try their keto-friendly menu. Come and enjoy Mezcla's half-a-day service at their Hagåtña and Grand Plaza Tumon location. Call their Hagåtña location at 479-2652 for reservations.
JV International Safety Equipment has it all for you. Fall protection, rain gear, traffic signs, speed bumps, custom signs and banners, PPEs, fire extinguishers, plus more. Check them out on Facebook at JV International Safety Equipment Company or visit their website, www.jvisec.com. JV International Safety Equipment, Guam's leader in occupational and environmental safety equipment. Call 688-9524. JV International Safety Equipment, located in Harmon Industrial Park.
Sorry, another Joe, but I got to go backwards. I found that section that I thought I'd lost, and here's where it occurred. The Guam Education Policy Board is among the government entities designated in 4 GCA Section 4105A, to which the Director of Administration may, at his discretion, delegate the authority to update its own pay plan. Wrong. And I have that section right in front of me right now. I'm going to give you a little legal instruction, and then I'm going to put my grammar Nazi hat on, and you're going to learn about the Oxford comma. Something new for you, Jose? The Oxford comma. Well, anyhow, here's 4 GCA 4105A. Rules subject to criteria established by this chapter governing the selection, promotion, performance, evaluation, demotion, suspension, and other disciplinary action of classified employees shall be adopted by the Board of Directors of the airport, GITA, et cetera, long laundry list of agencies, the Visitors Bureau, Consolidated Commission on Utilities, etc. And then finally, at the end, with respect to personnel matters within their respective branches, agencies, public corporations, or departments, and by the Director of Administration as to all other executive branch employees. Now, the Education Policy Board is in there, but this is what the sentence doesn't say anything about at all about a delegation of authority to update a pay plan. You know, it's once again rules and regs governing selection, promotion, performance, evaluation, demotion, suspension, and other disciplinary action of classified employees. So it's just not there. Now, not only is it not there, but there's no there's no comma between suspension and other disciplinary action of classified employees. And I almost never put a comma before and. When I've got a string of terms, I don't put a comma before and until I stumbled across the definition of the Oxford comma. If you put a comma before the and, it means what's after the and is another item in the list. If you don't put a comma before the and, it means the words after the and are only it's just a saying that all of these things are in pari materia. They're what's the word I'm looking justum generis. So it doesn't describe a new item. It just tells you about the items that came before the and. So since there's no and, these things are all of the same nature, and none of them deal with a delegation of power to increase salary. So the governor's wrong on that. If Frank had just taken some time and worked on this, he might have come up with at least a colorable argument instead of doing a press release arguments and trying to be, I guess the phrase is too clever by half. Frank was too clever by half. Now, with all these different laws being cited, it begs to ask the question, who's on first? A pretty dismal performance. Okay, let me see what another Joe wants to tell me, and let's see who else I've got in the green room here. I've also got Dr. Vince Akimoto. And Dr. Vince Akimoto, while you're waiting, I just got this WhatsApp from Tom Shea. Yeah, Tom Shea says, Bob, if you want to find out what it's like at Guam Memorial Hospital when you get home, throw a toothpick in the toilet and see how many times you have to flush it before the toothpick goes down the drain. It's going to be at least 3. Yeah. Okay, so we're going to talk to another Joe and then Vince Akimoto, who wants to talk about GMH pay. Go for it, another Joe.
Okay, Bob. So basically, if I'm hearing you right, it really helps to have a paid bill writer. Is it the same as a lawyer in your staff?
A bill writer is not the same as a lawyer. Not even close. Not even close. There, back in the day when I was legislative counsel back in the early 70s, we drafted almost all the bills. Even for the minority had its own counsel. I even drafted bills for the minority. But there was a reason that council drafted most of the bills, and that's because we had the only automatic typewriter in the entire building. It was called a mag card typewriter, and you would type something out, and it would be recorded on these cards, these black rectangular cards, and it wasn't anywhere near as good as what we have now, but it was a lot better than Hunt and Peck and correctional fluid, which is what you'd have to use if you didn't have one of those typewriters. So we drafted most of the bills. But then with the advent of the word processor, anybody could sit down and look at a bill and say, well, yeah, I can do something like that. What words do you want me to put in there? Yeah, okay, I'll make it look just like this, and I'll put the words in there that you want. So why would you want to pay a lawyer, $70,000, $80,000, $90,000 when you can hire some pimply-faced kid for $30,000 to be your bill writer? And it's going to look exactly the same. What's the difference? What's the problem, another Joe?
See, we're finding out right now, right, with his bill. Or, sorry, with the addressing how to fund the pay raises and stuff?
Well, if you're going to be a senator, you have to be able to make what's called an argument. And making an argument doesn't get on the floor and saying to the previous speaker, your father's mustache, or your grandma wears combat. That's not making an argument. It's argument as understood by lawyers, where you put together the facts and the law in such a manner that you think makes your position the most acceptable to any listener who's paying attention. And if you're not able to make an argument, you're not going to be very effective as a senator. Well, the governor here made a halfway decent argument. He made mistakes, but still, what Frank Blas put in a letter that he published is not an argument for all the reasons that I mentioned when I went through it. And, that's where a lawyer would come in. So, at the beginning of the legislature, they haven't had a lawyer since they've been in the minority. That's probably why they're still in the minority. Because, if you're going to go out in the football field, you got to know how to block and tackle. If you can't block and tackle, you're going to lose every game. And they haven't lost every game, but they've come pretty darn close to it.
Yeah, Bob, and it kind of helps that the governor's married to a lawyer, right? She probably is picking up some of his, some of those skills of putting those little traps out there.
What do you think, Jose?
Nope. There's no pro bono there. He has to get paid for that if he's giving advice, right?
Not really.
Not really?
No. Yeah,
okay.
he could, yeah.
He could be talking to his sleep or something, right?
Well,
pillow talk.
Yeah, pillows. Yeah, we do a lot of things here. And some, I suppose some of my commentary is a little bit invasive, but we're going to stay out of people's bedrooms.
Oh, I'm sorry. I apologize.
Okay, another joke.
I'll just keep listening before I fall into one of those traps.
Yeah, hey, yesterday, I don't know if you heard me or not, but we lost power here for a minute. And during the time we didn't have power, I pulled another Joe. I said, "Another Joe, can you hear me?"
Oh, snap.
See you later, another Joe. Okay, and then we have Dr. Vince Akimoto coming up next. Good afternoon, Vince.
Hi. You guys have a great show going on today. Everybody's sounding really smart, especially about Oxford commas. We're looking for guidance as the legislatures and our senators are doing pretty much the only thing I think they're really voted in to do, which is to control the purse strings of the government and develop a budget. Am I understanding
That's the most
that
important.
correct?
That's the most important. Everything else is optional, but they have to do a budget.
They don't need to go to those funerals. They probably don't need to be doing those weddings, and they certainly don't need to be standing on the side of the road showing just how good-looking they are in the rain.
And you'd think that 400 resolutions a year would be enough, but it isn't.
Yeah, and we're seeing a whole rush to reward government of Guam workers for their service, and certainly during this pandemic, there's been a lot of attention paid to the nurses at both public health as well as to the hospital. My concern is, as we're going through this budget, that the senators think or believe that the governor is telling the truth when she said she made the nurses' pay at GMH competitive. At this point in time, we are losing nurses, and we have lost doctors, and we are pretty much in the next couple of days going to reap the rewards of poor management of our limited resources on Guam. There will be shortly a declaration of emergency regarding our obstetrics care. There are more and more patients coming into the hospital with no prenatal care, meaning they couldn't see a doctor or a nurse practitioner prior to delivery, and so they're giving birth to sick babies, and the moms are in danger. So we are going backwards. We won't need abortions if we have dead babies because of bad pregnancies and bad deliveries. And this is not a theoretical. The present that our senators and our governor is giving to the people of Guam today is a hospital that is unsafe and a OB ward that is seeing some terrible medical problems due to the lack of obstetric care, lack of care for the mothers who are pregnant. And then we hope that our pediatric doctors are going to be able to keep up with babies who are very sick. I believe we lost one of our critical care pediatricians during the pandemic, and so we'll see if we're going to be able to replace that person. But I don't have too much hope about that because we lost a our coroner, our medical examiner, like 5 years ago, and we haven't been able to replace him either. So we can't even do autopsies on dead bodies.
Yeah, but we're looking hard for an abortionist.
And an obstetrician to apparently, prescribe the medicines to kill babies, right? So
Right.
I guess they found another way to do it, and that is to provide substandard obstetric care for women and families who presumably want to have healthy babies. So they're not going to the hospital to deliver the baby because they want to kill the baby. They're going there because they want to live. But the hospital is letting the people of Guam down because they don't have enough nurses, they don't have enough obstetricians, and the ones who are there, I think, have an average age of about 69, and they're tired, and they might get COVID. But either way, some of them are quitting, and some have already quit. So this is not a fictional tale. This is not a tall tale. And in the next 48 hours, people of Guam can wake up to the bad news. It's simply a delineation, I guess, a making known of what has already been the case, and people have taken it for granted that that's just the way things are. So, suck it up, buttercup kind of thing. But, mothers suffering terrible diseases as they give birth or babies dying, that shouldn't be taken lightly. I don't think we turn it into a political slogan. So the purpose of the call today is to really emphasize that whatever the governor thinks she's done and whatever the legislature thinks they need to do, it all ends with dead babies and broken moms and broken families if you don't pay attention to what's going on in the labor and delivery ward. And I beg you, I insist that you, Mr. Senator or Miss Senator, do that today. Don't go home. Don't think there's something more important. Go up to labor and delivery and prove me wrong. Prove me wrong. Talk to the obstetricians up there. Prove me wrong. Try to make an appointment with an obstetrician today. Prove me wrong. But it is dangerous at GMH tonight. And I would encourage everybody to make adjustments to their future plans to deliver babies. It might be better to go off island at this point. And so we will be looking forward to the official word from the physicians in the community who have been all talking to each other this afternoon as we have seen the consequences of a mismanaged healthcare system. And we will have an election in 6 days to let the public give the report card to the politicians who are playing with people's lives. Are you okay there?
I am. It's a mouthful, Vince. As usual, you laid out some really important things that tailgaters all need to know, so I appreciate your calling in and sharing that with us.
Thank you, sir. Have a great day.
Thank you. Yeah, Dr. Vince Akimoto. Yeah, public health is one of our top priorities here, It's why we put a nurse in charge of the hospital. Okay.
And an Adaloop.
And what?
And an Adaloop.
And an Adaloop, yeah. Okay, let's see. Where am I here? Next item on the card. I guess it's time to go to Churchill Downs, huh?
Are you looking for a new place to hang out with your friends? Let's go along the sidelines at Sidelines Bar and Grill. Located at 154 Iriarty Road, Unit 4 and 5 in Tamuning behind Royal Bigs. Sidelines, a hidden gem with nothing but great things to offer. Great atmosphere, great food, top shelf drinks, and a great team. What are we waiting for? Let the fun begin at Sidelines Bar and Grill. Open daily from 3 p.m. to 2 a.m. See you there.
Half a day, this is Honey. Here at APL, our expertise and extensive network can help you grow your business and reach out to more global markets. As a responsible carrier, APL is also committed to a sustainable future, whether it's protecting the environment or investing our efforts in giving back to the community. Our dedicated teams in Guam, Saipan, and on U.S. mainland are here to support you. Call 588-4651 or visit apl.com.
the home stretch on Tall Tale, 6 furlongs more, and I'll be crossing that finish line and heading for home. But I'll be back tomorrow. Tomorrow, by the way, a friendly reminder, tomorrow is Tailgater T-shirt day. Jose and I will be standing tall wearing our Tailgater T-shirts. And I would encourage all those tailgaters who've received their shirts to wear them, do a selfie, and post it on Facebook. Now, some of you may not have gotten them because we only started marketing them on Monday. And it can take as long as a week for the shirt to get to you after you've ordered it. Sometimes it's one day, sometimes it's a week. Just remember, they got to make the shirt after they get your order. Okay, I left off here yesterday, Tim versus Joni Gatlago. And remember we were talking at the beginning of the show about neo-Marxism and trying to convince you that everything that is right is wrong, and about useful idiots. Maybe Joni Gatlago is a useful idiot, but she's got her own banner to carry. And here's what she says. As our community struggles with insufficient reproductive health care, there you go, reproductive health care, killing babies in the womb, one of the highest rates of sexual violence in the nation, high numbers of teen and child pregnancies, and nearly 1 in 4 women living in poverty. It's disturbing that politicians choose to sponsor Bill 291 that does absolutely nothing to alleviate these pressing circumstances. Yeah, and it's not going to denuclearize North Korea. It won't cut down on people driving into concrete power. There's all kinds of problems that 291 won't solve, Jose. So why are we even bothering with it, I wonder? Anyhow, that's what she says. So then Tim comes back in a letter to the editor, and he says, reproductive rights integral to opportunity health care. The writer criticizes lawmakers for considering the anti-abortion legislation while noting Guam has one of the highest rates of sexual violence in the nation, high numbers of teen and child pregnancies, and nearly 1 in 4 women living in poverty. Apparently, the writer believes that easy access to abortion is necessary to address these social ills. However, said ills did not suddenly spring into being upon the closure of the last abortion clinic in 2018. In fact, the rapid increase in sexual violence, teen pregnancies, and women living in poverty in Guam parallels the expansion of easy access to abortion beginning in the 70s. Joni, a little different take here on cause and effect. In regards to sexual violence, easy access to abortion might have even been part of the problem, given that abortion is the ultimate destroyer of evidence and the perpetrator's best friend. According to Florida State Senator Ileana Garcia, limiting access to easy abortion is a critical step in combating sex trafficking. When the girl or woman gets pregnant and they can't make her get an abortion, or she doesn't want to get an abortion, or they can't get her to a place to get an abortion, they don't use her anymore. So they release her from the human trafficking ring. This ran in the WAPO on May 3rd, 2022. A few years ago, in what became known as the Blue House scandal, it was discovered that Micronesian women were lured to Guam to work at a bar and then forced to work as prostitutes. It was reported that at least one of the women became pregnant. She was forced to get an abortion and then made to, quote, go back to work. Abortion is not about liberating women. It's about liberating men, particularly bad men. Go after the perps, not the babies. Now, maybe Frank Bloss ought to call Tim. This is how you write a letter. You know, you don't act like you're wanting to write the supplement to War and Peace. You get to the point, you lay out the issue, you get to the point, and you hammer it home, and you close.
War and Peace did have a plot.
It did.
And a theme.
And a theme, yeah. Okay, I got about 6 more minutes to go. This is kind of old news, but I'll pick it up. It's Priscilla Tuncap versus the Civil Service Commission. And I read the release the day that it came out. It deals with the case that I filed at the Civil Service Commission because, well, what happened was I found out a guy named Roy Gamboa was working at the lieutenant governor's office and that he was a classified employee. Classified employees cannot be candidates for office. There's no getting around it. So I did a sunshine law request to the lieutenant governor asking him for all public records showing that he had turned in Gamboa to the Civil Service Commission for violating our so-called Mini-Hatch Act. The answer I got back was, we don't have any public records like that, meaning they had done nothing, right? So then the story picks it up from there. Although Gamboa submitted a letter of resignation on June 28, when he filed his candidacy with the Election Commission, the clearinghouse administrator asked him to continue to work, and Gamboa stayed on the job. Now, wouldn't you think that the clearinghouse administrator is also violating the Hatch Act? Now, of course, we remember we've got the affirmative defense. She didn't know. The clearinghouse continued to employ Gamboa until July 16, several days after Klitzkie sent the governor's office an email asking for information about Gamboa's continued employment. And I think what actually happened was the day after they got my letter, he quit. That's what actually happened. And it was a few days after that I sent it off to the Civil Service Commission. So they got the dates backwards. The 4 commissioners present at the beginning of Tuesday's commission meeting were Tuncap, it's Priscilla Tuncap, Chairman Anthony Benavente, Acting Chairman Anthony Benavente, Robert Titano, and John Smith, obviously an alias. It was the minimum attendance required for quorum. Gamboa is my nephew, Tuncap said, as she announced she would recuse herself from the case. Well, when I talked about this the last time, I said, I wonder if she really is his auntie, because in order to be Roy Gamboa's auntie, that means that Roy's mother or father are either your sister or brother. Other than that, it's not uncle, it's not auntie and nephew. And we use the term very loosely here on Guam. We use it for second cousins once removed, first cousins once removed. However, it's not the kind of thing that I would challenge, because it's unlike Frank Blas charging into battles that can't be won. If I were successful in convincing the Civil Service Commission that Gamboa is not really Tuncap's auntie, and she sits on the commission, you think she might vote in favor of her nephew? Yeah. So I'm just better off saying, yeah, I think she probably is auntie. Sota prim. Unable to take further action without Tuncap, including receiving information from the commission's staff, commissioners decided to move on to the next case. Legal counsel Miller, who was the central figure in a column that I wrote talking about the, oh yeah, I'll have to come back to this tomorrow because it's just about time for me to say goodbye to our president. I'll pick this one up tomorrow. Tomorrow is Tall Tales T-Shirts Day. Let's go, Brandon.
The Point is KUSG. Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
The court battle over the search paperwork. I'm Jack Callahan. Fox News plays out in a Florida courtroom this afternoon over the affidavit used by the FBI to justify the raid on former President Trump's home last week.
A federal judge will hear arguments on whether to unseal the affidavit and other materials used to greenlight that search warrant of former President Trump's Mar-a-Lago home. The Trump team is expected to argue in Thursday's hearing for the full Mar-a-Lago affidavit to be released, but the Justice Department is asking the Mar-a-Lago affidavit remain sealed, writing in part, if disclosed, the affidavit would serve as a roadmap to the government's ongoing investigation, providing specific details about its direction and likely course in a manner that is highly likely to compromise future investigative steps.
Fox's Matt Finn. Former Vice President Mike Pence says the Attorney General should release the affidavit.
The American people have a right to know the basis for this. This unprecedented action does demand unprecedented transparency.
But Pence also criticized calls to defund the FBI over the raid. The former chief financial officer of the Trump Organization will be in a New York courtroom on Thursday.
Alan Weisselberg is expected to plead guilty to tax evasion. He's the longtime associate of former President Donald Trump that has overseen finances for the Trump Organization. Prosecutors say he was part of a scheme to give under-the-table cash to company executives. Weisselberg himself allegedly took nearly $2 million. The plea deal will see Weisselberg testify against the Trump Organization, but not any Trump family member, and only serve about 100 days in jail.
Fox's Gernal Scott, the Miami-Dade police officer who was shot Monday night in a confrontation with a robbery suspect, has died of his injuries. Officer Cesar Echeverri was 29. America is listening to Fox News.
Get all of your favorite Fox News podcasts ad-free on Apple Podcasts with Fox News Podcasts Plus. From Trey Gowdy, the Fox News Rundown, Will Kane, Brian Kilmeade, and so much more. Go to foxnewspodcasts.com for all the details. The Fox News Rundown, a contrast of perspectives